The sun hung low over Oak Ridge City, smearing the skyline with streaks of molten gold. Traffic crawled lazily through the evening rush, headlights flickering to life one by one. Inside a charcoal gray sedan, Marcus Reed loosened his tie and exhaled, the hum of the engine and faint rhythm of the radio helping him shake off the weight of another long day at work. He wasn't in a rush, just eager to make it home, maybe pour a glass of wine, and unwind. The light ahead turned yellow, and Marcus eased to a stop, letting it shift to red without a second thought. That's when he noticed them, flashes of red and blue bursting in his rearview mirror. The sharp wail of a siren followed, cutting through the calm like a blade. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now, let's begin. Marcus's brow furrowed as he steered toward the shoulder. He rolled down his window, hands resting calmly on the wheel as the patrol car stopped behind him. Out stepped Officer Brian Keller, mid-30s, stocky build, buzzed blonde hair, and the kind of smirk that said he'd already decided how this stop was going to go. His badge gleamed in the fading light, one hand casually brushing the holster on his belt as he approached. "License and registration," Keller said flatly, his tone clipped, his authority unmistakable. Marcus nodded, retrieving the documents without argument. His movements were calm, deliberate, but he could feel Keller's stare crawling over him, assessing, judging. "Do you know why I stopped you tonight?" the officer asked, leaning a little closer than necessary. "I'm not sure, officer," Marcus replied evenly. His voice was low and polite, the voice of someone who'd had this conversation before. "You rolled through that light," Keller said, though there was hesitation in his tone. "I thought I stopped in time," Marcus said, his brow furrowing slightly. "But if not, I understand." Keller didn't respond right away. He lingered by the window, squinting slightly, as if trying to find something that wasn't there. The stop had shifted, it wasn't about a traffic light anymore. "You from around here?" Keller asked suddenly, glancing at the license in his hand. "Moved here a few months ago," Marcus said. "My address is on there." But Keller wasn't listening. His next question carried a sharper edge. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" Marcus met his gaze. "Just heading home from work." There it was, the invisible tension that always found its way into moments like this. Marcus could feel it simmering between them. Keller wasn't just enforcing traffic laws anymore, he was fishing, hunting for something to justify the suspicion already dancing behind his eyes. But Marcus didn't flinch. He knew how this worked. He'd seen it too many times. Keller folded the documents slowly, almost theatrically, before slipping them into his chest pocket. "Step out of the vehicle for me," he ordered. Marcus's hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel, but his face stayed composed. "Is there a particular reason for that, officer?" Keller's lips twitched. "I said step out of the vehicle. Don't make this harder than it has to be." The tone wasn't angry, it was a challenge. Marcus took a slow breath, then opened the door. He stepped out, tall and poised in a tailored suit, his shoes gleaming under the soft wash of sunset. Keller's eyes scanned him up and down, the expensive watch, the calm posture, the confidence that didn't match his expectations. "Hands where I can see them," Keller said. Marcus raised them slightly, calm and composed. "Of course. Is there something specific you're looking for?" "Routine check," Keller said with a faint smirk. "You'd be surprised what kind of people come through this area." Marcus turned his head slightly. "People in suits driving home from work?" The question landed like a jab. For a brief second, Keller's expression faltered, just enough to show he'd felt it. "Watch your tone," Keller said, his voice tightening. "I'm simply asking for clarity," Marcus replied, his tone still respectful, but firm. Keller took another step closer, his voice low. You seem to know a lot about how this works. You hiding something? Marcus held his gaze. No, officer. Just someone who believes in transparency. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Keller shifted his weight, pacing slightly. This wasn't playing out the way he wanted. Marcus wasn't nervous. He wasn't defensive. He was composed, too composed. You seem pretty confident, Keller muttered. Confidence isn't the problem here, Marcus said. Respect is. Keller froze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The street was quiet except for the hum of a distant engine and the whisper of wind through nearby trees. Keller's authority, once unquestionable, felt suddenly fragile. Turn around and place your hands on the hood, Keller snapped, regaining his edge. I need to check for weapons. Marcus's eyebrow lifted. Weapons? Do I strike you as someone who's carrying? I'm not going to ask again. Marcus hesitated for half a second, then turned and placed his palms flat against the cool metal of his car. Keller moved in, boots crunching against the pavement. His hands swept roughly over Marcus's back and sides, quick, forceful, unnecessary. It wasn't a search for safety. It was an assertion of power. You're clean, Keller muttered finally, almost annoyed that he hadn't found anything. Marcus turned to face him. Of course, he said quietly. Now, if we're done here. We're not, Keller cut in. You seem to know a lot about police procedure. Care to explain why? Marcus folded his arms. Let's just say I've worked closely with law enforcement for a while. Keller squinted. That so? What are you, a lawyer? A faint smile crossed Marcus's face. Something like that. The vagueness irritated Keller. He stepped closer again, his breath sharp. You think you're smarter than me, huh? Think you can talk your way out of this? I don't think anything, officer, Marcus said, meeting his gaze evenly. I just believe fairness goes both ways. And I haven't seen much of that here. The words hit harder than Keller expected. People like you always, Keller started, then stopped himself, the rest of the sentence hanging unsaid. Marcus tilted his head. People like me, he repeated quietly. Keller stiffened. You know what I mean. I think I do, Marcus said. His tone was calm, but there was steel underneath. And I think we both know this stopped being about a traffic violation a long time ago. Keller opened his mouth but no words came. For the first time, his certainty faltered. He was losing control of the narrative, and he knew it. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice level but firm. Officer Keller. I think it's time you know who I am. Keller frowned. I don't care who you are, he snapped, but the tiny crack in his tone betrayed him. Marcus reached slowly into his inner pocket. I'm reaching for my badge, he said clearly. So you don't mistake it for anything else. Keller's hand hovered near his holster, tension thick in the air. Marcus withdrew a black leather wallet and flipped it open. A gold badge glimmered in the fading sunlight. Marcus Reed, he said evenly. Director of Internal Affairs, Oak Ridge Police Department. Keller froze. His eyes darted from the badge to Marcus's face, disbelief flickering across his expression. You're? Yes, Marcus interrupted, saving him the trouble. I oversee officer conduct and internal investigations. My job is to make sure every badge in this city means what it's supposed to mean. The words landed heavy. Keller stepped back, his confidence draining from his face. Marcus's voice softened, but only slightly. Do you know what's most disappointing about this, Officer Keller? Keller said nothing. It's not the profiling. Not the escalation. It's that you did all this, without once questioning whether you were in the wrong. You just assumed I wouldn't know my rights. That I wouldn't belong behind this wheel. Keller swallowed hard, his gaze dropping. Marcus took a step forward, his tone steady but commanding. "Return my documents. Then take a long look at the man you chose to target tonight, and ask yourself why." Keller fumbled slightly as he handed back the license and registration, his hands trembling. Marcus took them, sliding them neatly into his wallet. Before getting back into his car, he looked over his shoulder. "Remember this, officer," he said quietly. "That badge doesn't make you powerful. It makes you accountable." As Marcus pulled back into traffic, Keller stood frozen by the roadside, the weight of what had just happened settling over him like a storm. He didn't know it yet, but this encounter would change everything. The night that followed was still, but Marcus's mind refused to rest. The hum of the highway lingered in his thoughts, along with the flash of those red and blue lights. It wasn't the first time he'd been profiled. But this time, it was different. This time, he had the authority to do something about it. By the next morning, the sun had already carved lines of gold through the blinds of Marcus's office, Internal Affairs, Oak Ridge Police Department. His desk was cluttered with open files, notes, and reports that painted a quiet but damning portrait of misconduct across the city's precincts. One file, however, sat squarely in the center of his desk. The name on it, Officer Brian Keller. Marcus flipped it open, his sharp eyes scanning every page. There it was, a pattern that had been quietly buried under layers of paperwork. 3 prior complaints of unprofessional behavior. 2 reports of aggressive conduct during minor stops. Each case marked with the same word in red ink, resolved, though none of them truly were. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He steepled his fingers and exhaled through his nose. Keller wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom, a reflection of a deeper rot that had spread through the culture of the department. A soft knock broke his thoughts. "Come in," he said. The door opened and Jasmine Cole, his assistant, stepped inside holding a stack of files. Her tone was brisk, but her eyes showed quiet respect for the man sitting behind the desk. "Morning, Director Reed," she greeted. "Here's the monthly summary on officer conduct reviews. Also, Chief Alvarez asked me to remind you about the department audit next week." Marcus took the files and nodded. "Thanks, Jasmine. Can you also clear my schedule afternoon? I need a meeting with the chief today." Jasmine hesitated, picking up on the edge in his tone. "Of course. Should I tell him what it's about?" "Not yet," Marcus replied. "He'll know when we talk." When she left, Marcus sat back in silence again. His eyes fell on the corner of Keller's file where a black and white photo of the officer was clipped. He didn't hate Keller, not personally. But Keller represented something Marcus had fought his whole career to change, unchecked authority without accountability. And this time, it wasn't going to get swept under the rug. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into Chief Robert Alvarez's office, a wide space lined with plaques, framed commendations, and a faint smell of old coffee and cologne. Alvarez, a seasoned veteran with gray streaks through his hair, looked up from a pile of papers as Marcus entered. "Marcus," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," Marcus said, sitting down. "We need to talk." Alvarez leaned back, reading the weight in Marcus's expression. "This about a case?" "In a way," Marcus replied, sliding Keller's file across the desk. "Officer Brian Keller." The chief's brows knit together. He opened the file and glanced over the notes. "Another complaint?" "You could call it that," Marcus said evenly. "But this one's personal." Alvarez's eyes lifted. "Personal?" Marcus nodded slowly. "He pulled me over last night. Said it was for rolling through a light. But the stop turned into something else. Something much uglier." The chief exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temple. "Marcus, you know I take these things seriously. But are you sure you're not?" "I'm sure," Marcus cut in, calm but firm. "You know I don't bring something to this table unless it's solid. And Keller isn't an isolated case. He's a pattern the department keeps ignoring. The chief fell silent for a moment, scanning the file again. This isn't the first time Keller's name has come across my desk, Alvarez admitted. But we've always handled it quietly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That's exactly the problem. Quiet doesn't solve it, it buries it. And it lets it keep happening. Alvarez sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. You know how this works, Marcus. Every department has bad apples. We discipline them, we move on. Marcus's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. Bad apples rot the barrel, Chief. Moving on isn't fixing it. It's hiding it. The chief looked up, studying the man across from him, not as a subordinate, but as someone who refused to look away from the truth. What are you suggesting? Alvarez asked finally. A full internal review, Marcus said without hesitation. Not just Keller, every precinct, every officer. We need to audit training procedures, disciplinary records, complaint handling, all of it. Alvarez leaned back, expression grim. That's going to make waves. You'll have half the department against you. Marcus met his gaze. Good. Maybe they'll finally start paying attention. The room went quiet again, the hum of the overhead light filling the silence. Alvarez's voice softened. You're going to ruffle feathers, Marcus. You always do. Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. Then I guess it's about time they learned to fly straight. The following weeks were a storm of meetings, interviews, and data collection. Marcus worked long hours, barely leaving the office. His team combed through old complaints, body cam footage, and witness statements. Patterns began to emerge, the same officers, the same behavior, repeated across districts with no real accountability. Meanwhile, word of the Keller incident spread quietly through the precincts. Some officers avoided Marcus in the hallways, others watched him with a new mix of fear and respect. And Keller himself? He'd been suspended pending investigation, but Marcus knew the hearing was only the beginning. This wasn't about punishing one man. It was about confronting a culture. At night, when the office was quiet and the city outside had gone to sleep, Marcus would sit at his desk and stare at the words engraved on the metal badge resting beside his files. Integrity. Service. Accountability. He ran his thumb over the words and exhaled. For most people, those were just slogans. But for Marcus, they were a promise, one he wasn't willing to break, no matter the cost. When the internal hearing for Keller was finally held, Marcus sat across the table from him. Keller's once confident posture was gone. He looked smaller now, nervous, unsure, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him. Officer Keller, Marcus began, his tone even. Do you understand why you're here? Keller's voice faltered. Yes, sir. This isn't about a single traffic stop, Marcus continued. It's about conduct, about the kind of behavior that erodes the trust between officers and the people we serve. Keller swallowed hard, his eyes flicking up for a brief moment. I made a mistake. Marcus nodded slightly. You did. But understand this, mistakes like yours aren't accidents. They're choices. And choices have consequences. The room was silent as Keller nodded, visibly shaken. The verdict was swift, a 60-day suspension and mandatory retraining. But Marcus knew the true victory wasn't in punishing Keller. It was in setting a precedent. Months later, Marcus stood on a stage at a community event, rows of officers, city officials, and citizens watching. He looked out across the crowd, his voice calm but resonant. Justice, he said, isn't just about catching criminals. It's about holding ourselves accountable, every single one of us who wears this badge. It's about ensuring that power never replaces compassion, and authority never outranks respect. The applause rose slowly, then thundered through the hall. Marcus smiled faintly, not with pride, but with conviction. This was only the beginning. Change didn't happen overnight. But it was happening. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus believed that the badge might finally start meaning what it was supposed to. The next morning, the courtroom was quieter, the kind of silence that hums with anticipation. The media had caught wind of the incident, and now camera crews lingered outside like vultures. Inside, however, Judge O'Malley sat with the same smug expression, pretending none of it bothered him. He adjusted his robe, cleared his throat, and said sharply, "Let's continue where we left off. Mr. Barlow, I trust your tools have been properly put away this time." A low chuckle rippled across the benches, but Jerome didn't flinch. He stood there calm, composed, hands behind his back. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his tone steady. "But this time, I brought something more valuable than tools." The judge raised a brow. "And what might that be? Another wrench?" Jerome stepped forward and pulled out a neatly folded set of documents. His voice dropped lower, firm but respectful. "Evidence. The kind that proves my company's innocence." The prosecutor scoffed. "Objection, Your Honor." The defense had weeks to submit any supposed evidence. But Jerome cut in smoothly, this wasn't in their records. Because they hid it. The room stirred. Even the judge sat up straighter. He gestured reluctantly. "Proceed. But make it quick." Jerome walked up to the clerk, handed the documents over, and turned toward the judge. "These," he said, "are internal communications between your prosecutor's office and the rival firm that filed this lawsuit. They arranged a settlement months ago, off record. My company was targeted so they could eliminate competition." The prosecutor's face drained of color. "That's a lie." Jerome didn't raise his voice. He just stared him down. "Then explain why your signature is on the bottom of those emails." A murmur rolled through the courtroom. Judge O'Malley's smirk began to fade. He flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening with every line he read. Finally, he looked up, his voice a little less confident now. "Where did you get these?" Jerome's lips curved faintly. "From the company's internal server. I designed it years ago. You could say. I left a few back doors open." Someone in the back gasped. Even the court reporter paused typing for a moment, glancing up with wide eyes. The judge shifted in his seat. For the first time, his tone softened. "Mr. Barlow, are you suggesting a conspiracy against your company?" Jerome met his gaze steadily. "No, Your Honor. I'm proving one." The tension was palpable. Every sound, the shuffle of paper, the tick of the courtroom clock, seemed magnified. And then, the unexpected happened. From the back of the courtroom, a familiar figure rose, a tall man in a gray suit with government insignia pinned to his lapel. He approached the front bench calmly, speaking to the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Agent Cole, Department of Corporate Integrity. We've been investigating this matter quietly for 6 months. Mr. Barlow is correct. His evidence aligns with our findings." The prosecutor froze like stone. The color drained from his face completely. Judge O'Malley leaned back, his voice barely above a whisper. "My God." Jerome didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just stood there, the man everyone mocked yesterday, now holding the truth that had the power to upend everything. "Your Honor," Agent Cole continued, "we request an immediate adjournment while we process the evidence. This court may have been compromised." Judge O'Malley hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Adjourned." The gavel came down, but the echo felt more like a reckoning. As people began to stand, whispers swelled like a storm. Reporters rushed for the doors, cameras flashing. Jerome remained still, watching the judge, who now avoided his gaze. For the first time, that arrogance in O'Malley's eyes was gone. In its place was something else. Fear. Jerome turned and walked out through the courtroom doors, the murmurs following him like a shadow. The mechanic had just shaken the system to its core. The following day, the courthouse was surrounded by flashing lights and restless crowds. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting over each other as Jerome Barlow arrived once again, this time not as a defendant, but as the man who had exposed one of the biggest judicial scandals the city had ever seen. He wore the same old jacket, the same faded shoes. Nothing about him screamed power. But the way people looked at him now, it was different. Respect. Curiosity. Awe. Inside, the atmosphere was charged. The prosecutor's seat was empty, suspended pending investigation. The judge's chair, however, was not. Judge O'Malley sat there, visibly rattled but trying to keep what remained of his composure. He struck the gavel weakly. Court is now in session. The sound didn't carry the same authority it once did. Jerome walked to the front with measured steps, setting down his papers. The silence was thick enough to cut through. Mr. Barlow, the judge began, before we proceed, I must acknowledge the gravity of yesterday's revelation. The court owes you an apology. Jerome's eyes met his, calm but unflinching. I'm not here for apologies, Your Honor. I'm here for justice. The words hung in the air like a blade. Agent Cole sat near the front, his presence a reminder that this wasn't business as usual. The department had already raided several offices overnight. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. O'Malley cleared his throat. Very well. Please present your closing statement. Jerome stepped forward. His voice was steady, every word deliberate. When I walked into this courtroom, I wasn't a man people respected. I was just a mechanic in their eyes, someone who didn't belong here. But I've spent my whole life fixing broken things. Engines. Systems. Machines. And yesterday, I realized, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Some systems are designed to stay broken. Because the people running them profit from the damage. The spectators leaned in, every word hitting harder than the last. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came here because innocent men and women at my company were being destroyed by greed. By people who think status gives them the right to play God. But today, he took a deep breath. Today proves that no matter how deep you bury the truth, it finds its way out, even if it has to crawl through the grease and grit. A soft murmur of agreement spread through the gallery. Judge O'Malley shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't interrupt. Not this time. Jerome concluded, I've repaired engines that were left for dead. I've rebuilt systems everyone said couldn't be fixed. So believe me when I say this, justice isn't broken. It's just waiting for the right hands to fix it. The courtroom erupted into quiet applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. The judge didn't stop it. He just sat there, staring down, the weight of his own pride finally visible on his face. After a long pause, he looked up. His voice trembled slightly. Mr. Barlow, this court finds you, and your company, innocent of all charges. The case against you is dismissed with prejudice. The words hit like thunder. Reporters scrambled for the exits, shouting into microphones. Jerome closed his eyes for a brief moment, exhaling deeply. Relief washed over him, not the kind that comes from victory, but the quiet kind that comes after a storm finally passes. As he gathered his papers, Judge O'Malley spoke again, softer now. Mr. Barlow. I misjudged you. For that, I'm truly sorry. Jerome looked up, his expression unreadable. You didn't misjudge me, Your Honor. You misjudged what I stood for. He turned and walked toward the courtroom doors. The applause followed him all the way out. Outside, the sun was bright, too bright after the shadows of that courtroom. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded around him, but Jerome didn't say a word. He just looked toward the horizon, that calm engineer's mind already moving on. Because for him, fixing one broken system was just the beginning. The courthouse steps had never been so loud. Reporters surrounded Jerome as if he were a celebrity. Cameras clicked, microphones pushed close, and questions fired like bullets. Mr. Barlow. How did you uncover the corruption? Is it true the judge was part of the cover-up? Are you planning to sue for damages? But Jerome didn't answer. He wasn't the type to chase attention. He simply nodded politely, muttered a quiet, no comment, and continued walking until he reached the bottom of the stairs, where a familiar figure was waiting. It was Samantha Green, his company's lead engineer and oldest friend. She had tears in her eyes. You did it, Jerome. You actually did it. He smiled faintly. No, we did it. You held the team together when everything fell apart. Samantha shook her head, still stunned. You could have walked away, after how they treated you, after what they called you. Jerome looked back at the courthouse, where Judge O'Malley was visible through the glass doors, slumped at his bench, head down, no longer the untouchable figure he once was. I couldn't walk away, Jerome said quietly. When something's broken, I fix it. That's just who I am. They shared a small, knowing smile before walking toward the black sedan waiting at the curb. Agent Cole leaned against it, sunglasses glinting under the sun. Mr. Barlow, he said, pushing off the car, you've made quite a mess for some very powerful people. Jerome shrugged. I didn't break anything. I just showed everyone what was already cracked. Cole chuckled, extending a hand. The department could use a man like you, someone who sees through systems and people. Ever thought about consulting for us? Jerome raised an eyebrow. I thought your department only worked with lawyers and investigators. We do, Cole replied. But none of them think like an engineer. Jerome's gaze drifted toward the skyline, his mind turning gears. The city stretched before him, vast, flawed, and full of hidden machinery. I'll think about it, he said finally. But right now, I've got a few engines in the shop that need me. Cole smiled knowingly. Something tells me you'll be getting a lot more calls than that. As Cole walked away, Samantha nudged Jerome playfully. You know that was basically a job offer from the federal government, right? He smirked. I know. But I'm not sure they can afford my hourly rate. They both laughed, the tension finally lifting after weeks of pressure. For the first time in a long while, Jerome felt the weight on his shoulders ease. Later that evening, back at his modest workshop on the city's edge, Jerome stood alone under the flickering fluorescent lights. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, his kind of peace. He reached for a wrench, tightened a bolt, and whispered to himself, every system fails eventually, but as long as there's someone willing to fix it, there's still hope. The radio buzzed in the corner, reporting the breaking story. Mechanic exposes massive courtroom conspiracy, Judge O'Malley under investigation, prosecutor suspended, and corporate fraud ring dismantled. Jerome Barlow, the man behind it all, refuses interviews. Jerome smiled faintly as the report played. He didn't need the spotlight. He'd done what he came to do. Because for him, justice wasn't about fame. It was about restoration. And as he shut off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air, the city glowed faintly in the distance, full of broken things still waiting to be fixed. Night had fallen over the city, that quiet, reflective kind of night that comes after chaos finally settles. The streets glistened from a light rain, neon lights painting the puddles in streaks of red and blue. Jerome Barlow stood outside his small workshop, locking the gate. He took a deep breath, the scent of oil and cold metal lingering in the air. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Inside, everything was back in order, tools lined neatly on the wall, machines silent, the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock steady and calm. The same place that once felt like a cage now felt like freedom. He walked to the edge of the lot where his father's old truck sat. Faded paint. Rusted bumper. But it still ran smoother than most new cars in the city, because Jerome had built it, bolt by bolt, from the ground up. As he ran his hand along the hood, a voice broke the silence. You really did it, Samantha said softly from behind him. She leaned on the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Jerome smiled faintly, taking one. Did what? Proved everyone wrong. He chuckled under his breath. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I was trying to prove that the truth still matters, even when people bury it under power and pride. They stood there quietly for a while, sipping coffee as the hum of distant city traffic echoed through the night. Samantha looked at him carefully. You could have taken that offer, you know. The government gig. Big money. Big recognition. Jerome shook his head slowly. Recognition fades. But integrity, that's what builds things that last. A car drove past, splashing rainwater onto the curb. The headlights briefly illuminated his face, calm, resolute, unwavering. Samantha smiled. You sound like your father. Jerome looked up at the stars. He used to tell me something when I was a kid, he said softly. When a machine fails, son, don't curse the rust. Just clean it, and keep it running. Samantha nodded. Guess that applies to people too. He smirked. It applies to everything. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the skyline. Samantha looked toward the horizon. So, what now? You gonna take a break? Jerome set the empty mug down on the hood of the truck. Maybe for a day or two. But something tells me this city's got more broken systems waiting for me. She laughed. You're addicted to fixing things. Maybe, he said, smiling. But someone's got to. At that moment, the radio inside his workshop crackled faintly, an old police scanner he used for fun. A dispatcher's voice came through, muffled but urgent. All units, report of corporate fraud and server breach at Helion Tech. Possible whistleblower evidence leak. Requesting immediate investigation support. Jerome's eyes flicked toward the sound, then toward Samantha. She sighed. Don't tell me you're thinking what I think you're thinking. He grabbed his jacket from the peg and threw it over his shoulder. I'll just, take a look. Jerome. He turned back with a grin. Relax. I'm just fixing things. As he climbed into the old truck and turned the key, the engine roared to life, smooth, powerful, alive. The headlights cut through the mist as he drove off into the sleeping city, the rain beginning to fall again, light, steady, cleansing. The radio faded behind him, replaced by the sound of the engine and the soft hum of hope. Because for Jerome Barlow, the man they mocked, the man they underestimated, this was never about revenge or recognition. It was about restoring balance in a world that had forgotten what integrity looked like. And as the camera panned up, the city lights stretched endlessly, glowing like circuits waiting to be repaired. Narrator, voiceover. Some people see a broken world and walk away. Others pick up a wrench and start fixing. Because truth, like a good engine, always finds a way to run again. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters, too.